It's October again, which means that it's now time for the 13 Days of Are You Afraid of the Dark? I don't know if it's just me, but whenever Are You Afraid of the Dark aired other than during SNCC, it always seemed to be this episode. Either this or The Tale of the Manaha, which isn't on this list. But this story begins with construction workers renovating a local museum when it's discovered that there's a false wall in the basement. So they cautiously knock it down and accidentally find a mysterious crate. While trying to remove it, the new guy that shouldn't be operating machinery causes an immeasurable amount of damage to the priceless artifact, and it's revealed to be an ancient Egyptian sarcophagus. Enter our two main characters, Cleo and her brother Josh, played by Danny Cooksey, who was also in Salute Your Shorts, but you may also remember him as the ginger kid with the mullet in Terminator 2. Anyway, they were about to go on vacation with their widowed archaeologist father when news of the discovery prompts them to stay. Turns out the sarcophagus was from the Egyptian Temple of Light, which was robbed in 1921. Apparently the thieves were so happy with their new treasure that they decided to just leave it behind a false wall for decades. So the tomb belonged to Mina the Guardian, an Egyptian goddess who still possesses a ring of eternity, believed to bring forth life and turn her enemies to stone. I guess there's a guardian's curse that threatens horrible death and torture upon those who disturb her tomb. But the family didn't disturb the tomb. Unless they're talking about the fake wall they smashed, then technically the construction workers would be cursed. Anyway, the kids go back to the museum to get some important papers for their dad. After Josh expresses his whiny teenage angst about not getting to go on vacation, they find a hidden compartment containing the elixir of life. But clumsy Josh accidentally spills some life juice on Mina. In a frenzy over their find, Josh and Cleo realize that they forgot the papers and have to go back. When they get back to the office, they notice that Mina has done her best The Mummy impersonation by rising from her grave and walking away. They get home to find the place ransacked and their dad unaccounted for, so it's back to the museum.
Dad! Dad! He's not here!
And they give up looking for him after yelling 2 times. Now I'll admit that what comes next is a pretty creepy scene. Too bad I can't show you it. But all these episodes are on YouTube anyway. So the fact that a 10,000-year-old mummy is walking around understandably sends them running from the room and into the basement. It's a labyrinth of archived artifacts that has a strange aroma of kerosene. After searching the area for a way out, they finally find a fire exit, but it's locked. What a coincidence. Suddenly they hear the mummy approaching, so they do their best to slow her down by throwing a couple of empty boxes in the way. Then Josh finds another exit, but it's been jammed shut. From out of nowhere, they find their dad, who's been sleeping on top of some boxes a la Snoopy from Peanuts. Man, I gotta get more updated references. So it turns out the mysterious stalker is actually Dr. Capel Smith, the pudgy archaeologist who ransacked their home looking for the Ring of Eternity. It just so happens that he was also the one that soaked all the other artifacts in kerosene. So then the family is given a choice. Either hand the ring over to the doctor, or the whole place will go up faster than the price of toilet paper during COVID. Given no choice, they hand it over. So the doctor tries the ring on for size and becomes immortal. And by immortal, I mean he gets painfully turned to stone. If only he had the elixir of life, too. But there's still that whole undead mummy wandering around the museum problem they forgot about. Luckily, it's just Yoko Ono, and all she wants is her Ring of Eternity. That turns her back into a hot Egyptian goddess, and in return, she randomly falls in love with the dad. So after a vicious attack of culture shock, Mina is forced to adapt to our weird 20th century customs like cramping indoors and burying priceless artifacts in the walls for no real reason. And they lived happily ever after. It's a great episode, and that's really saying something because it's only number 1 of the 13 days of Are You Afraid of the Dark. We've still got 12 more to go, and believe me, I'm only just beginning. This one starts with Stacy, a girl who suffers from what a lot of main characters in Are You Afraid of the Dark suffer from. Being the new kid in town. I swear that every other story has some kind of variation of a kid being new and all alone. Anyway, Stacy is the new kid, so she doesn't know too many people. Except for the angry foreign landlord that's way too preoccupied with parking spaces. Other than that, she's always catching glimpses of an old neighbor lady watching her from apartment 214. After some snooping, Stacy finds that the mysterious lady is just an old shut-in named Madeline, and a friendly old shut-in at that. They quickly become friends, doing things like getting Madeline groceries, drinking tea, and looking at weird old paintings. After a while, they get real close, so Madeline asks for a favor from her. She just wants Stacy to visit and sit with her on a very important day that's fast approaching. A day on which Madeline doesn't like to be alone. But it turns out that Stacy's other friend, Angela, the one that was born in the 20th century, has tickets to a really kick-ass battle of the bands on the same night. What to do? Loud popular music surrounded by a sea of viciously hormonal teenagers, or a riveting night of watching a Murder, She Wrote marathon? It's a no-brainer. Only after returning from the concert does Stacy remember her promise, mostly because she can hear Madeline weeping all alone in her apartment. Stacy sees that Madeline is just sitting in the dark because, hey, if you already have cataracts, then what's the point of wasting electricity? But understandably, Madeline is a little miffed that she was stood up, until Stacy turns the light on and Madeline, along with her furniture, scatters faster than a plague of cockroaches. As you can imagine, this kind of thing would freak anyone out, so Stacy runs home and right to her mom, who doesn't believe her. So it's time to get to the bottom of this whole mess, and what better place to start but with Mr. English as a second language. Through a string of sentence fragments, it's revealed that no one has lived in apartment 214 for years, and every time the landlord brings people in to look around, they're scared off for one reason or another. So as time passes, Stacy begins to accept that Madeline is gone and is never coming back. She'll just have to live with the guilt of being so rude and blowing her off. Until one random night when Stacy is left unsupervised does Madeline finally come a-knockin'. Or maybe not. So Stacy decides to check it out. Luckily, no doors are ever really locked in Canada, so she walks right into 214. Where she finds one of Madeline's perpetually eerie paintings. Then she skadoos right into it, just like Steve from Blue's Clues, only to find all the furniture back in place and Madeline waiting for a jump scare. Turns out that the day in question was the 10th anniversary of the day she died. So Stacy flees to the higher ground known as her apartment because Madeline can come and go as she pleases, but fortunately can't pass through doors. Actually, Madeline can appear anywhere she wants around the apartment except inside it. Then Madeline slides a note under the door, but I'm more surprised by how nice her penmanship is considering she's been dead for 10 years. Left with no other alternative, Stacy runs to her friend Angela's apartment down the hall and pounds on the door until...
blackout!
Then Stacy's dog is compelled by an unseen force to enter Madeline's home, thus forcing her to follow. All of the furniture is still intact and Madeline is nowhere to be found, but she's still present. Stacy finds the dog hiding in the closet and, all gay jokes aside, is happy that her little friend is safe. Suddenly, Madeline appears in a jealous and neglected rage, but Stacy explains the whole mishap with the concert and says that all that she ever really wanted was to make a friend. This hits Madeline right in the feels, so she instantly calms down and apologizes. She says that she's much too set in her ways to move on to the afterlife, so she's kinda stuck in limbo, forever fearing the day when someone finally moves in and she's driven out. So quick-thinking Stacy devises a plan to convince her mom to move into apartment 214. I mean, it's a 2-bedroom with a ridiculously low price, so it's a win-win situation. So now Stacy, her mom, and Madeline, the potentially hostile ghost, live together, which raises some concern about what will happen when Stacy grows up and moves on with her life like kids usually do. But I guess they'll have 5 or 6 good years until that happens, and they'll cross that bridge when they get to it. But this was a memorable episode that really resonates more with me now that I'm older. It taps into that fear that a lot of people have about the death of loved ones and never getting to say what needed to be said. But as Mike and the Mechanics put it so eloquently in their song The Living Years, say it loud, say it clear. It's too late when we die to admit we don't see eye to eye, and make damn sure there's a clause in your renter's agreement about eventual ghosts. So 2 kids named Augie and Jasmine are being dumped off at a private school by their parents. A weird school, with weird tones instead of school bells, because it turns out the bells cause the principal some mild discomfort. They've been replaced with tones to represent different classes, which is more soothing according to him. But other than that, it seems like a pretty normal school. Except all the kids eat something that looks like runny mashed potatoes and cottage cheese called sponge, which turns all the students into brainless zombies doomed to dress, act, and think exactly the same. Individuality and free thinking are not tolerated at all, just like at a real school. Fortunately, our 2 heroes didn't eat any sponge, so their minds are free to grow and mature without the quote-unquote educational system impeding them. Anyway, it's revealed that every night the brainwashed kids get out of bed and venture to the basement where they take turns lightly salting strange eggs that are partially submerged in water. But lo and behold, the principal and some other teacher were behind it the whole time, so the kids followed the 2 teachers, being sure to watch from the most well-lit area possible, like this one right here. I don't know how the lady doesn't see them, I guess it's just for plot convenience. But it's discovered that behind the vacant and vapid smiles of the teachers lay their true and ungodly forms. Just like well, you know. But the jig is up, and now the 2 have nowhere left to run. Clearly leaving the school would make too much sense, so down into the basement they go. And right into the lair of the faculty's vicious dinosaur-like queen that kinda looks like those things from Super Mario World. But Augie has a trick up its sleeve. What is the #1 cause of free thought but loud music, of course? It happened in the Soviet Union with the Beatles, so why shouldn't it work here? Actually, it's a high-frequency sound that causes the queen to explode, which is why the principal was so freaked out about it before. Admittedly, it's a pretty tense scene, but I only say that so I don't feel like a jerk for pointing out the particularly doofy model in a split second before they blow it up. But apparently there's a hive mind mentality because when the queen dies, so do the teachers. Not to mention the eggs that also crack open and somehow wind up 1 floor above where they were all floating. Except for 1 egg that succumbs to sequelitis and refuses to die like the rest. It's an episode that ultimately deals with conformity in society and the pitfalls that go with it. Do what everyone else does, think what everyone else thinks. Pretty soon the line between right and wrong is blurred and you don't know what's true and what's being said just to keep the subordinates towing the line. And before you know it, you're all worshipping a supreme chancellor whose only goal is to hasten your destruction and bring about a new army of genetic ubermenches. Or you could just say it's a kid's TV show and the students were being brainwashed by a giant alien reptile overlord. Simple as that. The tale of the ghastly grinner starts with Ethan, a kid that's going through something a lot of us experience at one time or another in our lives. The soul-crushing realization that the one and only thing you want to do in life isn't working out as well as you'd hoped. In Ethan's case, becoming a successful comic book artist. After several rejection letters, Ethan is faced with the sobering possibility of being doomed to man a cash register or mop floors for the rest of his days, endlessly lamenting his squandered talents as his 18-year-old manager tells him to clean up a mess that some bratty kid just made in aisle 3. But there's one bit of mail that gives him a ray of hope. It's a postcard telling about the grand opening of a new comic book store in his town, one cleverly called Comic Books Inc. They don't say where or when the event is, so naturally Ethan finds a place no problem. It's a veritable nerd den, complete with references to other Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes and a picture of Superman sporting a sweet 90s mullet. So the store is ran by Frankie, your run-of-the-mill free spirit that doesn't bend to societal norms such as dressing like a lady or giving people nicknames that are relevant. She gives Ethan the nickname of Cakes. How the hell she came up with that, I'll never know. So Frankie sent Ethan the letter in hope of finding a skilled enough artist to finish the final work of a comic book legend named Sylvester Unkis. A comic book legend that also happens to be her father. Although I don't know why she'd be so willing to save the person who gave her the name Frankie Unkis. Anyway, Sylvester made a comic titled The Ghastly Grinner, about a villain so hideous that his mere laugh could reduce his victims to giggling idiots. It only ran for a single issue and then Sylvester disappeared shortly after. Frankie says that she possesses the only surviving copy, which is a total lie because the girl over in the Tale of C7 is reading one too. So she gives the quote-unquote last copy to Ethan so he can learn the story and hopefully defeat the ghastly grinner once and for all. The next day, Ethan is in a science class taught by someone who looks like a short-sighted Ted Turner. Well, a more short-sighted version of him considering how much money he sank into World Championship Wrestling. But the teacher doesn't take too kindly to people slacking off in his class, so he makes the comic book sleep with the fishes, see? What a dick. So Ethan takes the comic home and tries to dry it off by putting it in the microwave for 10 minutes. 10 minutes? What, does he want to set the thing on fire? It only takes a few seconds to fry a Game Boy Advance, trust me, I know. So this thing wouldn't last nearly that long, especially with the metal staples. No wonder this kid is flunking science class. I guess you could say that he was distracted by a girl calling him on the phone, so I'll give it a pass. It's actually a girl named Hooper, who looks like she's going to grow into a cat lady when she's older. We can see early indicators of her feline-ridden floral department working dinner for one life right here. It turns out she was in the class and saw the whole thing. She was calling to comfort Ethan when his extra crispy comic destroys half the kitchen. It appears that he accidentally freed the ghastly grinner, essentially a living, breathing cartoon character, complete with perfect outline when he crashes through the wall. Even his cape is strong enough to leave a mark. But before escaping, the grinner decides to turn Ethan's parents into giggling morons, which didn't seem much different than how they normally were, what with their "I've given up on life so I don't bathe and mostly spend my time watching daytime TV" like tracksuits they both wear. So Ethan runs outside to catch his breath when Hooper appears out of nowhere. It's kinda weird that she not only knew his phone number but also where he lives. Even weirder is the fact that Hooper's parents show up right at that time to have some sort of dinner party or something. Oh well, they're goners too. So the two take the time to actually read the comic and find that they're going to have a bumpy ride when the bus driver reveals that he ran into the grinner too. He decides to go nuts and reenact his favorite Keanu Reeves movie while being sure to step on the gas and the brake in the process. Until Ethan puts a stop to that. Moving on. They get back to the comic book store and Frankie finally reveals what she could have just told Ethan the first time, thereby saving him the headache. She needs him to complete the final edition of the ghastly grinner and finish him off once and for all. But the grinner was there the whole time and decides to make himself known by grabbing Frankie by the throat, surely breaking her neck in the process. But at least Hooper has an idea. Microwaves. So it's back to the perpetually unlocked school and into the easily accessible classroom that has a gigantic microwave emitter. But the teacher catches them and is furious enough to make a very ironic statement.
This is no laughing matter, young man!
But the grinner appears and makes him lose all sense of reason, just like when the real Ted Turner decided to colorize classic movies like Frankenstein or Citizen Kane. Since the microwaves have no effect, even though the process should fry the teacher from the inside out, it's back to Comic Books Inc. to recuperate. And by recuperate, I mean do the thing that should have been done in the first place. Finish the final issue. Ethan works on his masterpiece while Hooper keeps a lookout, and not very well at that. The grinner pulls the old act like an inanimate object in a comic book store trick and puts a stop to everything by sucking Ethan into the drawings themselves. It just so happens to be the same place that the Grinner took Frankie and her dad Sylvester Unkes as well. So it's up to Hooper and her comically oversized eraser to destroy the irreplaceable art and free them all in the process. And the day is saved as a very winded Sylvester Unkes hands the finished work to Ethan. So the moral of the story is, if you aren't succeeding in the career that you want, then just attach your name to other people's creations. It worked for Michael Bay, why shouldn't it work for anyone else? It's more different than the usual Are You Afraid of the Dark episode, what with the cartoony atmosphere and the over-the-top hammy acting by the ghastly Grinner. For the longest time, I wasn't sure if it was from this show or from an episode of Erie, Indiana. It's just so off the wall. And I'm sure I'm not the only one to notice the similarities between the ghastly Grinner and the Joker. He's a laughing psychopath that leaves his victims with a permanent smile plastered on their face.
You want to know how I got these scars?
Look at me!
I try not to include episodes that are based on some sort of literature, like The Midnight Ride being based on The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, but it's still just different enough to warrant it a place in the 13 days of Are You Afraid of the Dark? This episode revolves around Simon, an average kid with average goals, most of which involve screwing with his younger brother Evan. He's the kind of kid that pulls the old make them go long for a pass and then steal their bike routine, ultimately forcing his brother to run all the way to school. Not only that, but when Evan finally makes it there, Simon has already asked the girl that Evan has a crush on to an upcoming dance. I've never met a person named Simon that was so smooth with the ladies. Usually they're either total nerds or hell-bent on killing John McClane. Anyway, Evan is late for first period, and we see that Simon is in the same class, which doesn't say much about his level of intelligence. Also, they have one of those chubby teachers that gets off on drawing attention to the fact that you're running behind. What's the excuse? You overslept? A relative died? Your jerky brother stole your bike and made you run 8 blocks before catching your breath? It doesn't matter because you're late and should be treated like the tardy scum that you are. Anything to help make the teacher feel a little better about his miserable life that's already half over and spiraling out of control. At least he has that one shred of authority to cling to that helps alleviate the overwhelming desire to hang himself in the janitor's closet during lunch. Wow, I'm getting kind of dark here. Anyway, today is a special day because the computer lab teacher Mr. Poe has a new invention. Something revolutionary called virtual reality. Real science fiction stuff, I know. But an issue arises before trying it out. Keep in mind that this story takes place in that magical time where the overall health of your computer was indicated by either a skull or a smiley face. It's an issue that can be fixed by simply pressing a bunch of buttons. And it's this episode that I finally realized no one in movies or TV ever uses a mouse. They just mash the keyboard until something on the screen changes. So it's time for the first test run, and what could be better than reliving the simulated experience of getting up early in the morning to go to school? But things are a little off because Simon's self-riding bike usually brings coffee and sings public domain songs. Odd. To add to the weirdness, he finds that a disgusting, slimy, beady-eyed, cackling silver midget has commandeered his dad's office. I'm sorry, I don't want to offend anyone here. I mean, a disgusting, slimy, beady-eyed, cackling silver short person has commandeered his dad's office. Turns out he's a virus and will be downloaded directly into Simon's brain once the game ends. Or in 10 minutes, whichever comes first. But once the helmet is off, everything seems normal until Simon mentions the whole virus thing. Then Mr. Poe, totally out of character for any legitimate person of science and technology, is deeply offended and yells at him to leave. That's about the time when Simon finds that a VGA computer port has appeared on his palm. Also, everyone is moving backwards and giving really incorrect answers.
Does anyone know what 2 + 2 equals?
5?
Correct. Anyone else?
6. 6 minutes left.
Hey, it still makes more sense than Common Core math. But Simon soon learns that karma's a bitch when his bike is locked, forcing him to run home. Where we see even more sci-fi nonsense when he and Evan appear to have some sort of an internet video-based conversation through the computer. So Evan reveals that he was the one behind it the whole time in order to get back at Simon for all the crap he's pulled. But then Evan is interrupted by the virus, and it looks like he hasn't quite gotten the hang of proper blue screen keying yet. So Evan tells him about an abort code, but is disconnected just before revealing it. That can mean only one thing. His time is up. But Simon thinks of the abort code in the nick of time. It was Evan's locker combination. And in a display of sheer cockiness, Simon decides to throw out a one-liner before pressing any key, which leaves the virus with plenty of time to do exactly what he does, because the virus is about to forcibly insert his male connector into Simon's female slot. Just a little computer humor. So Simon is about to have the virus downloaded straight into his brain, which doesn't make too much sense considering that it's through a cable that only transmits video. But rather anticlimactically, Simon presses any key with seemingly little restraint. This causes the virus to lose his shit and phase out of existence, but not before revealing that viruses have salivary glands.
Rule number 2. Forget rule number 1.
There you go, Simon. Now did it kill you to say that after he was defeated? So now everything is back to normal, and they lived happily ever after. Simon forgives Evan, but still steals his bike again, so no lessons were learned. Just the way a kid's show should be. It's a very sci-fi heavy episode, with things that amazingly do actually exist nowadays, like Skyping and even virtual reality. The only decent kind of virtual reality they had back then was that Windows 95 Maze screensaver. Man, I could stare at that thing all day. Every time I saw this screen, I was like, I don't need to watch Are You Afraid of the Dark this week. Then I'd spend the next half hour under the covers, occasionally popping my head out to see the awesome 90s commercials. Anyway, this episode is about a selfish jerk named Sam and his older brother Mike. You might remember the actor playing Mike as Simon, the kid who was terrorized by that disgusting, slimy, beady-eyed, cackling silver short person in the Renegade virus. They're out to buy a birthday present for their mom. Mike finds the perfect gift, but it turns out that Sam took the spending money and bought a video game for himself. One called Zeebo's Big House. Funny that I haven't mentioned Zeebo on this list yet. Anyway, as you would expect, this doesn't sit well with Mike. He tries to return the game, but the toy shop Sam bought it from just closed. Mike tries to reason with the antique shopkeeper by saying he'll have the money the next day when the other store opens. But I guess a random kid's promise means nothing even in Canada, the most trusting place on earth. So Mike gets fed up with Sam's crap and tells him whenever he acts bad or steals, an inanimate doll in the store named the Crimson Clown will get him. It's just something Mike says to get him to stop being a jerk. But then strange stuff starts to happen. So they get home late and have no good excuse when their mom asks where they've been. Sam, in his natural douchiness, makes up a story that gets his brother in trouble. Oh, and it turns out the clown followed them home. Well, here we go. Yeah, this was the part I didn't like as a kid. I know it's not much today, but in my defense, it's scary as shit when you're 5 years old. Just imagine if you were watching some public domain movie and then all of a sudden the doors locked and a super long clown arm popped out of the TV. At that point, I would do two things. Crap my pants and run. But it was all just in Sam's head. Or was it? Later that night, he has a nightmare that he's back at the shop and the Crimson Clown is stalking him. But luckily he wakes up and it goes into an extreme close-up of his face, which, as we all know, always means something good in this kind of situation. Oh wait, never mind. After a little stranger danger, he breaks free and tries to wake up his brother, but shock of shocks, it's the clown. He grabs Sam by the legs and starts to drag him out the door, but fortunately they're in Canada, so that means that there's an obligatory pair of ice skates in his bedroom. After Sam is free, the clown decides to come in to handle things himself. By just kind of standing there.
Menacingly!
Sam finally admits that he was wrong for being so selfish, and we see that the morning sun has vanquished the horrible night. He can start the day off right by apologizing for being a douche. They return the video game and buy the gift for their mom. As a kid, I always thought the shopkeeper had something to do with it. I mean, he acts so damn weird and suspicious. Even during Sam's nightmare, we see the Crimson Clown is wearing the shopkeeper's clothes. That can be pretty confusing to a 5-year-old. Now, if you want to overanalyze a 20-year-old kid's show, I think the Crimson Clown was the physical manifestation of Sam's guilt for getting his brother in trouble and ruining his mom's birthday. The only way to get rid of the clown was to tell the truth. But as big of a D-bag Sam is, I can kinda relate to him. I know what it's like growing up with an older brother. They're bigger, they've done more stuff, they know more people, so naturally you take everything they say as true. One time my older brother told me that if you mix 2 different kinds of shampoo, then your hair will burst into flames, and I actually believed him. They can plant an idea in your head, and your little kid imagination can run away with it. The tale of the bookish babysitter begins with Belinda. I won't give away too much info about her, but let's just say she sits babies and can be quite bookish. She spends most of her time doing and saying weird things that, in the real world, wouldn't land her much repeat business. For instance, muttering stuff under her breath well within earshot of the parents, and dressing like a member of the Addams family. Unfortunately for Ricky, the kid who's being babysat, books are not his forte. He prefers to do things that every kid in the 90s did, such as watch black and white public domain movies like White Zombie. Belinda says no, so it's time for him to hit the books and broaden his imagination. But luckily, Ricky has a Game Boy to help stifle this sudden surge of intellectual enlightenment. Until someone casts a shadow over the damn thing, rendering it useless. Turns out it's just the knight who's tired of waiting his turn to play. Suddenly, the knight turns into a ghastly old man who looks like he just crawled out of some bushes. Fortunately for our 2 heroes, specters are able to pass through any object they wish except doors, so they're safe for the time being. Belinda is busy burning pages of her mysterious omniscient book in order to destroy whatever entities Ricky has set free. But things are not all that they appear to be. It turns out that Belinda was never really in the room, and the other Belinda was an imposter. Actually, it's a man in drag, but that's beside the point. The fake babysitter was actually trying to destroy the book for his own personal gain, which begs the question, if he wanted to destroy the book, then why didn't he just throw the whole thing in the fire all at once? But they soon find out that a man in drag is a powerful foe because he moves their barricade away from the door with ease. Left with no other alternative, Belinda and Ricky are driven into the basement. Ricky is reminded once again that he has control over the story, so he does the first logical thing anyone would do in this kind of situation.
They ran down to the basement where he kept his Uzi. Yeah, his Uzi! Just in case of attacks by knights, ghosts, and other nasty things.
But Nickelodeon's standards and practices won't allow it, so Ricky has to get creative, or even worse, imaginative. He then grabs the book and begins to read when, without warning, gets sucked right in. After the initial confusion of being teleported to another place, he realizes that the book is recording everything he says, which has some of the best voice recognition software ever, especially for 1994. Even in 2015, it would probably read like...
He stared blankly for several seconds, unable to believe his eyes.
Anyway, it turns out Ricky has been teleported to a dank crypt full of dead people who are also trying to broaden their imagination.
Oh, gross!
But he's not alone, and now all Ricky needs to do is find a sign to quell the vengeful night. It ends up being the sword on his shirt. Thank God Ricky wore that particular shirt today. I wonder what would have happened if it was in the laundry that day and he had to wear something else. But out of pure luck, it works, and the knight surrenders the sword. Then he dies just like Obi-Wan Kenobi. Sort of. From out of nowhere, a little girl appears, but surprise, surprise, it's the man in drag again. Ricky slices him open like a tauntaun and is promptly knighted by the newly freed king for his heroic service. I guess it just goes to show that if you want to stop watching TV and read a book, then you'd better be ready to do battle with a knight who's out for your blood. And the moral of the story is that most problems can be solved with violence. Only by disemboweling someone does Ricky finally learn to never take his imagination for granted. This episode begins with two kids named Jeff and Perch. They're in a band and struggling to find any inspiration. Perch is a metalhead through and through, complete with eclectic riffs, while Jeff is a sensitive wimpy boy who favors the synthesizer and seems like he'd be a perfect fit for Depeche Mode. They just can't seem to agree on what their sound should be. Other than that, Jeff's dad has a real kick-ass basement computer setup and one of those bulky satellite dishes that just screams, "I'm rich enough to have over 100 TV channels, please rob me." But the two of them are going to use it without his permission to illegally watch a WWF pay-per-view featuring Razor Ramon and Bret Hart as the headliners. I'm sorry, just Hitman. 2 words. Kinda funny that they can't get his name right considering Bret Hart is a Canadian hero and, as I've said on a handful of occasions, this is filmed in Canada. But that's beside the point, because our two heroes are about to willfully subvert strict international copyright laws to watch two grown men hit each other with limp and open fists for absolutely free. All Jeff needs to do is jump a couple security gates and uplink to the satellite. While he's doing that, Perch finds a binder detailing something called the Peabody Project, classified stuff involving deep space communication. Suddenly they're interrupted by Jeff's bratty little brother who ends up blackmailing him into making a banana split. But Perch starts sticking his nose where it doesn't belong by reading through the binder and initializing the project. The computers start running through a program that ends with a screenshot of our Milky Way galaxy. It asks for coordinates, so Perch just arbitrarily mashes the keyboard and presses enter. All that's left is to send a message. He figures the keyboard will work fine, so he decides to send a series of tones. Then he beams it across the universe.
She's so...
No, not that across the universe, just literally across the universe. And it's received on the other side of the galaxy in a matter of like 8 seconds. I apologize in advance for getting scientific, but this has always bugged me. Now, the Milky Way galaxy is approximately 100,000 light years across, a light year being how far light travels in a year. Perch is sending a radio signal which cannot travel faster than the speed of light. Nothing can do that. That's why the aliens on Omicron Persei 8 didn't see the epic conclusion to Single Female Lawyer until 1,000 years later. So this signal would take 100,000 years to reach whatever it's just reached. I'm sure it's for time convenience, plus I'm also sure the episode would be a lot less interesting if it involved a couple of skeletons. Perch suddenly receives a loud response, also in tones, which should take another 100,000 years, but whatever, moving on. It turns out the parents come home earlier than expected, causing them to sloppily shut things down. The dad is played by the same actor that appeared in the other Are You Afraid of the Dark episode, The 13th Floor, except in that episode he was playing an alien-robot hybrid, yet he's more robotic this time as a human father.
Except you did the one thing we asked you never to do.
He says a line that I'm assuming is meant to be delivered with anger, but he says it like his cat didn't quite make it to the litter box.
Except you did the one thing we asked you never to do.
On top of that, the jerky younger brother rats him out by refusing to wipe the chocolate syrup off of his face. So later that night, when everyone is asleep, extraterrestrials finally arrive. The aliens make weird tones that drive the dog Montana out the constantly open back door and into a trap. The next day, Perch and Jeff have forgotten about that whole first contact with an alien race thing and are still arguing about what kind of lyrics they should write. They try to take inspiration from their real-life experiences. Turns out you can't write about what you know when all you know at age 16 is where the lotion is kept in your house and which websites aren't blocked. Later that night, the two go out looking for Montana and leave the little brother to play t-ball in the yard. But like almost every red shirt in Star Trek, he's quickly doomed. Perch and Jeff are still out looking until the aliens decide to play a little game with them.
Montana? Montana? Who's there? Who's there? That's not funny, man!
But them's fighting words for Jeff, so he angrily runs at the source of the noise and almost into another glowing spiderweb. They catch a brief glimpse of the creature entering some kind of thin door with no backside. After touching one of those wall-mounted closet lights, the door opens right up. They throw a dog toy in to test if it's safe, but it's thrown back right into Jeff's crotch, so the two of them bolt back to the house and into the basement to find all the computers on and 5 new messages received, the last one coming from Earth. Perch goes upstairs to continue the search for Jeff's brother, but gets snared in a trap himself. Now it's up to Jeff, whose only option is to speak softly and carry a big stick. He bravely jumps through the thin metal door and finds the 3 of them stuck in unbreakable tubes. Perch says that the aliens communicate in tones and a D-sharp is used to free them. Jeff runs back and records it on a boombox, then quickly returns.
Jeez, I hope they wipe down the tubes when they're done with them. Ugh.
But they aren't free for long, as they're soon surrounded by webs on all sides. The aliens turn out to be skinny, yellow, semi-transparent creatures capable of determining someone's language just by cycling through every language on the planet until one works. As it would happen, the original visitor is a kid looking to play. The song that Perch beamed out translates into "We are toys," and the tones that the alien child has been making means "I've come to play." The mother ex machina apologizes for the inconvenience and teleports back to their ship. In return for not vaporizing the Earth, Jeff and Perch perform their first song for a very select audience, a song titled "We Are Not Toys." Some of you might know how I feel about this particular song. I can really ramble about this episode because it's definitely one of my favorites. The concept of first contact always interested me, and when you think about how many stars are in the sky, most with planets orbiting them, the possibility of life out there isn't out of the question. Let's just hope that they're the family-friendly E.T. kind, and not the R-rated dissect and itemize your organs kind. So the tale of the frozen ghost starts with a girl named Daphne, who's played by Melissa Joan Hart. She's babysitting Charles, a kid with rich parents who are off on some honeymoon. I guess his parents put all their trust in a limo driver and a 16-year-old girl to help deliver their son to a couple of old aunts who live in the middle of nowhere. Aunts that none of them have ever even met. When they get to the front door, they see that the aunts own one of those cool self-rocking chairs. Oh, how nice for them. So they turn out to be real nice old ladies who always stumble or drop shit whenever anyone mentions ghosts. And they're really not subtle about the house being haunted either. They stand in close proximity of each other and just yell about how they don't want to scare the kids by mentioning the ghost. Unfortunately, Charlie isn't deaf and can hear their loud argument. It freaks him out, so he tries to take a bath to calm down. But there's creepy stuff happening in the middle of nowhere, and it's up to Charlie to be really whiny and scared the rest of the episode. So the aunts explain that decades ago, their family was split in two over some money. It had something to do with a criminal working on their farm too, but that's just kind of shoehorned in there. The criminal got caught and was put on a train back to prison. A train that ran off the tracks, everyone died, and they never found the criminal's body. Then mid-story, more weird stuff starts happening again. This causes one of the aunts to completely lose her sense of subtlety and just flat out say, must be the ghost that haunts our property. As you'd expect, this gets Charlie worked up, but then the aunt backtracks and says how that's a subject that no one should talk about. She says that strange things happen when it's discussed. Well, I guess that explains why the chair on the front porch was already rocking. Wait, no it doesn't. Unless the two aunts just sit around the house by themselves all day and talk about it. So now that Charlie has validation that ghosts do in fact haunt the property, he doesn't get the best night's sleep. He has a nightmare that he's stuck in a log and being chased by the criminal they mentioned earlier, until suddenly he wakes in a cold sweat, just in time to see his window swing open and a small ghost boy appear. All the boy says is, that's not going to get your point across, and odds are it's just going to scare people. You should have said something like, hey kid, can you throw me a blanket and a thermos of hot chocolate or something? But no, he goes the creepy lack of information route. Now, even though it's been established that there is a ghost, Daphne still doesn't believe it. That is, until the next morning when the aunts continue to bluntly announce that the place is haunted. They're so obvious that they should have just put a sign on their lawn so even people driving by will know the great news. They say he was some neighbor kid that froze to death on their property, just like in Charlie's nightmare. So hearing about the untimely death of a young child puts them in a wood chopping mood. But Daphne finally gets fed up with Charlie's whininess and decides to dirty him up a bit. They hear some noise over yonder and see footprints appearing in the mud. It's a pretty good effect, too. I can imagine how hard it must have been to try and press footprints into the mud, in between cuts mind you, without screwing up anything around it. Turns out the footprints belong to the frozen ghost who then appears and leads them to the log from Charlie's nightmare. They find a jacket and a mysterious key falls out of the pocket. So the ghost puts on the jacket and disappears. I guess the afterlife has a real strict dress code. The two of them show the key to the ants and they instantly realize that it goes to their clogged stovepipe. As it would happen, it was jammed with gold and the criminal was planning to steal it until the kid got in the way. So the one ant uses the money to finance her book. It was universally panned, but at least everyone else lived happily ever after. This is one of the more memorable episodes, with a quote that's almost become synonymous with the series. There are maybe a few other episodes with more staying power, such as The Tale of Cutter's Treasure, or that one involving a certain clown that haunts a carnival attraction. But we'll get to that particular one soon enough. This one starts with the main character, Ross, visiting the mall. He does heroic things such as fight hobos over loose change and get yelled at by security. But in his spare time, he likes to go to a shop run by an angry old man named Mr. Olson. An old guy that clearly hates Ross, but after a short argument, reluctantly puts him in charge of the shop. While minding the store, in walks Sophie, a girl who's there to pick up her music box. Ross uses his expertise to help her.
I don't really work here.
Never mind. Lucky for him, she's into stammering, nervous, and all-around incompetent guys, so now she's the love interest. But that doesn't stop Ross from defying Mr. Olson's orders by screwing around with his new pinball machine. Little does he realize, several hours have passed, and now he's locked in the mall after closing time. Then strange things start happening. Payphones are ringing, rides are coming to life, and quarters are raining from the sky. As he marvels at the strange phenomenon, mysterious people emerge from nowhere and start wandering around aimlessly. Kinda like old people in real malls. But they're actually robots that kinda look like Vinny from Spaceballs. It turns out water is their weakness, so they're kept at bay. Then Sophie appears, dressed like a damsel in distress. She throws Ross some sort of key, but it lands right in the middle of the robot guys. It turns out the key goes with a mall locker, and in true 90s Nickelodeon fashion, he gets slimed. After opening another locker and finding a Snoop Dogg concert, he stumbles upon a tiara and can move on to the next level. To Ross's surprise, the tiara has turned into a crown and the quarters have turned into pinballs. Then Sophie shows up again and refuses to tell Ross what's happening, because, you know, teams work best when no one communicates with each other. Unfortunately, Ross is stopped by the wandering mall witch like some sort of hallway Snorlax. Then she proceeds to blow him away and back out the door. But I guess wind is his only weakness, because the witch easily takes the tiara for herself. I mean, he's not unconscious or anything, he's looking right at her and he sort of just hands it over without a fight. So with his inventory empty, Ross rushes back to Mr. Olson's shop to grab the music box, but finds Sophie tied up in the back. After being freed, she still refuses to fill him in on what the hell is happening. Suddenly, the store mannequin comes to life and begins to attack, but fortunately he was only aiming for the breakable stuff behind them. I guess executioners really hate porcelain tchotchkes. So now we have a stereotypical lumbering stalker wandering around the mall. With the throne in their inventory, Ross and Sophie arrive in the nick of time to steal back the crown. I don't really know why the music box throne makes the crown disappear. I guess it's some sort of yin and yang thing. Anyway, as they hide the throne in a trash can, they're attacked by the executioner who, luckily again, was only there to swing at something other than them. After which he leaves the mace on the trash can. So they very easily escape the executioner and inexplicably find the crown floating in a display case. Ross adds it to his inventory. Sophie is abruptly captured again by Eye Patch Guy, and in an act of desperation, she throws the crown away. It starts gliding on the ground, and Ross tries his hardest to stay one step behind it while never actually grabbing it. The crown stops at the trash can in which they had previously stashed the throne. With all the items, he's finally ready for the next level, where he activates the throne and causes it to grow to normal size. For the hell of it, he decides to go for a ride. It comes to a stop at an elevator just as Eye Patch Guy is exiting and swiftly gives him a game over. Ross gets fed up and decides to use his Game Genie to get a new weapon and skip to the final boss. Sophie is being held hostage by the robots, but all they seem to be doing is an Irish drinking song. Since they're no threat, it's just him and Eye Patch Guy. And that guy. Derp. Like I said, one-on-one. So Sophie is crowned the new queen and they live happily ever after. Oh wait, I meant it had a downer ending. Turns out Mr. Olson has trapped Ross inside the new machine and has given him unlimited replays. As Ross sees the pinball come over the horizon, he realizes that, win or lose, he's doomed to repeat the game forever. Not unlike the myth of Sisyphus, with the pinball in place of a boulder. This episode is one of the rare examples where things don't work out in the end, which, ironically, I find to be a breath of fresh air. Things in life don't always go the way you want, but the story is usually more interesting when the characters face insurmountable odds with a certain tact and resolute dignity. For example, The Bridge on the River Kwai would have been a really boring movie if it started like, "You are all prisoners of Camp 16. Escape is impossible. You would die. Tomorrow you will all begin construction on a bridge across the River Kwai. Oh wait, never mind, the bridge is all done." The point I'm trying to make, but taking a long time to make, is that things don't always have to come up roses. You might say that I see the glass of life as half empty, but I prefer to think of it as half full of crap, and the other half filled with whatever helps you stomach it. Be it relationships, religion, alcohol, work, or even a forbidden pinball machine that sucks you in and won't let you go. This episode centers around a guy whose name is Matt. Everyone walks all over him. Honestly, I finally got that only when I wrote this piece. This episode also features the same actor that played the bully kid in that episode that we all know is coming up next. Big surprise, he plays a mean-spirited jerk in this one too. Doing things like smearing ketchup in Matt's face right before his school picture and stealing his textbooks to play floor hockey. Insert obligatory Canadian joke here. But Matt is the kind of kid that never really stands out, as indicated by his yearbook photo. Understandably, not being in the photo raises some suspicion, so Matt goes to the photographer's studio to get some answers. He's promptly reminded that he's a nobody and is given a mysterious old camera in lieu of a refund. Remember that the photographer gave the camera to Matt, because that comes up later. Then he briefly laments the fact that he's just potentially screwed up a 15-year-old's entire life by giving him a secretly dangerous weapon, like giving a monkey a loaded pistol and not teaching him what the trigger does. In a matter of seconds, Matt accidentally takes a picture of himself. It develops showing a bunch of schmutz on his shirt, which is odd considering that he took a picture of the inside of his nose. But nevertheless, the picture's prophecy of a dirty shirt comes true. After a few test pictures, it's revealed that whatever the camera shoots ends up getting destroyed. Like a window and a fish tank that does this weird boiling thing that surely kills all the fish inside. He then tries it out on the bully, but first he feels the need to give him the worst burn a 9th grader can think of.
Hey, call back! You know you're a total butthead?
At least the worst burn a 9th grader can think of and still get a TV rating of G. It would have been a lot more wicked of a burn if he said something like, "Hey, you f***ing asshole, I f***ed your mom last night. She squealed like a damn greasy pig when I mayonnaise all over a spatula." That's more along the line of how a 15-year-old boy would talk. But regardless, the whole butthead line works, thus awakening the ginger giant. But Matt has a form of defense that I've only seen work one other time, when Jimmy Stewart had a Raymond Burr up his ass. Luckily, the selectively absent basketball coach appears and stops the fight dead in its tracks. Yet the homoerotic tension between them is palpable as the bully angrily checks out Matt's body up and down. After practice, we see the director's use of subliminal suggestion by telling the audience to use drugs. Then a locker inconspicuously falls on the bully's leg and wedges his ankle between it and a bench, almost surely breaking it in the process. Now Matt has a memento to commemorate the occasion. With Operation Take Pictures and Knock Heavy Shit on My Enemies a success, he moves on to other victims. I mean, totally deserving martyrs of justice. And we see just how big of a doormat this kid is when he decides to exact revenge on like 90% of his classmates, until he inadvertently takes a picture of his sister. One accidental picture later and he's suddenly against it. It was okay for the camera to knock a chandelier or locker onto his enemies, but not his sister. That's going too far and it must be stopped. Or better yet, returned. Matt goes back to the photographer's studio and finds that he's gotten a surge of good luck since getting rid of the camera. It turns out that the photographer has become so rich and successful that he no longer needs clothes that fit properly. Then the guy reveals that it's most likely a little gremlin that's on all the pictures that's responsible for this mess. He then says that the camera chose Matt and therefore couldn't take it back even if he wanted to. As I recall, the camera had no effect on the situation until the guy thought of it spontaneously. See? Unless the camera has some kind of remote mind control, it sure as hell didn't choose anyone. I believe that Matt has just met his very first con man. As soon as he gets home, he accidentally photographs his parents who are on their way out. Despite Matt's constant pleas, the parents still go to the movies, but not before saying one of the most frequently said things in all of the horror genre. A variation of the tried and true "I'll be right back" statement. Only instead of a masked maniac wielding a sharp object, this one involves them colliding head-on with a truck. We get subtle hints of their parents' crumbling marriage as the couple have run out of things to say to each other and resort to fighting over the car radio. The dad fails miserably at masking his dissatisfaction towards the person he honored to love and obey till death do they part, no doubt having the latter half of the song Paradise by the Dashboard Lights running through his head. In the meantime, the sister believes that destroying the camera may break the curse that's been set in motion, only to find it intact minutes later. So plan B is to take a photo of the camera itself and hope that it'll self-destruct. The picture is taken and the parents miss the truck by mere inches, but as it develops they see that the camcorder was in the frame, thus causing the gremlin to jump into that. They both desperately try to avoid being on GTV by hiding behind the furniture and repeatedly turning off the television. I bet you didn't know that if you hold down the power button the whole thing will explode. Now all they have to do is explain to their parents why they blew up the TV and singed the walls. The episode ends with the gremlin infecting Windows 3.1, surely violating the operating system's terms of service. It's yet another episode that ends on a potentially negative note. But to counteract that, I'm going to try and end this video on a high one.
Katie Holmes is a nice, respectable, wholesome girl, and I'm going to see her boobs.
If you get my drift. I think I'd piss a lot of people off if I didn't include this one in the 13 Days of Are You Afraid of the Dark. It starts with two random girls going into a haunted house. Now I know it's not that scary, but this girl could at least try to look frightened. Anyway, the story is really about these three kids, Josh, Ouija, and Kathy. They're at the amusement park and are starting to get cold feet about going into the haunted house, mainly because of an urban legend that the ride is haunted by the spirit of Zeebo, a cigar-smoking criminal clown who died in the original fun house in the 40s. He also has a laugh that kinda sounds like that old chicken limbo game. Josh reluctantly agrees to go inside under the condition that if he takes Zeebo's nose, then Ouija will have to wear it at school for a week. On the way in, he's greeted by the ride operator. It's actually Aaron Tager, who plays a familiar character named Dr. Vink.
Dr. Fink?
Vink.
Except here, he's playing a mix between a weird omniscient observer and a passive-aggressive sexual predator that got a job at a carnival. His eerie and off-putting personality causes Josh to have second thoughts. So the next day they're hanging out in what appears to be a bedroom, or at least a bedroom in Canada. Kathy inexplicably has information on the real-life Zeebo by way of newspaper articles, but Josh is still skeptical about the whole situation. After a little persuasion, he decides to try the ride one more time.
Guess who?
Hand over the dough. What do you think I am, some kind of clown?
What do you think I am, some kind of clown?
Okay, this is something that's always bugged me. What exactly is this thing? Is it Zeebo risen from the dead? Is it his ghost? Is it a highly sophisticated machine built by Disney Imagineers that can mimic other people's words? It's never explained. Suddenly Josh is stopped dead in his tracks by an enormous fire-breathing dragon, a major liability issue that I'm sure has the park's lawyers pulling out their hair. You know what? Come to think of it, every time I've been in a funhouse, I've never been alone. If this was real life, then there'd probably be a mom and a crying kid going through this part at the same time, but I guess that would just suck the tension right out of the scene. So Josh finally gets up the courage to open Zeebo's door and steal his nose, even managing to flip him off as he leaves. And it's at about this point that I notice Josh and Ouija never say anything nice to each other. There's never any indication that they're even friends. Josh is an asshole and they just sort of tolerate it. Kinda like Doug Funny and Roger Klotz. Later that night, Josh is home alone and cooking meatloaf when he hears a noise.
Somebody's in there. You better show yourself, or you're gonna get beamed.
Yeah, you really beaned him. So he returns to the kitchen and discovers that someone put Lincoln Logs in the meatloaf. It's the work of none other than Zeebo, the only clown to have his initial on the sole of his shoes. It's either Zeebo or Lord Zed. But Josh still thinks it's Ouija pulling a prank, so he calls him. Now this part is why I like this episode, because it's actually a pretty tense scene and it used to scare me when I was little. It's one of those situations where the call is coming from inside the house. It's Zeebo, and luckily he brought an entire rack of lights to help accentuate his presence. So it's out the window and back to the carnival, but I'm just wondering how he got in so easily. The ride is shut down, so I would assume the place is closed for the night. But Josh makes his way back and looks into Zeebo's deadlights. As an offering, he gives him back his nose complete with an apology. He also obtains a box of cigars and gives them as a bonus. Somehow. So Zeebo has his nose and everything is fine. Or is it? Love it or hate it, this is the episode that everyone seems to hold in the highest regard. It set a precedent early on that this show wasn't going to be all sunshine and rainbows, succeeding at keeping a dark tone while still maintaining a TV rating of G. You gotta give anyone credit for being able to pull that off. Even going so far as to inspire horror buffs and all of the children of the night to this day. And, in case you didn't notice, there are a few Phobia episodes that bear the same titles as some of these. Obviously, the creators of that series took huge inspiration from this show, most of it budding from this particular episode. That does it for the 13 Days of Are You Afraid of the Dark as far as the episodes go. The final one being about a major part of the series that has been noticeably absent in these videos. I'll give you a hint. It's about a group of kids around a campfire and their collective name rhymes with mid-flight sobriety. The answer to that perplexing riddle, next. The Midnight Society are a diverse group of kids who don't go to the same school, live in the same town, or even like the same things, but what brings them together is the dark. I don't know how they hooked up in the pre-internet era, but it had to have been through classifieds or something. They fill out the stereotypes pretty well. Gary, the nerd, Eric and David, the wimps, Kristen and Sam, the hot girls, Frank, the jock, and Kiki, the tomboy. In later episodes, adding Tucker, Gary's younger brother that's forced into the group by the overriding decision of their mom, who in turn initiates Stig, the typical smelly gross guy character that gives women second thoughts about swinging the other way. I felt it was necessary to dedicate an entire video to them because they weren't just tools used to introduce the latest tale. Admittedly, what they did was always relevant to the episode, but it was done in a way that was almost a self-contained story within a story. A good example is from The Dangerous Soup, an episode dealing with the manifestation of people's fears. The kids around the campfire discuss what scares them, and when it gets to Tucker, he starts acting like a Billy Badass by saying that nothing does. So Frank challenges him to put his hand inside a box containing something mysterious to prove it, but Tucker chickens out and runs off. It's revealed that what was in the box was exactly what Tucker was afraid of.
Nothing.
After watching every show of the first iteration, I've discovered a formula that they use in almost every episode. Whoever's telling the story gives a brief summary of what their tale is going to be about, and then the rest of them give each other a look that's like, "Aw shit, things are about to get real up in here." The stories deal with things from aliens to zombies and almost everything in between, even having the occasional recurring character. First there's Mr. Sardo.
That's Sardo. No, mister. Accent on the toe.
A character in Gary's stories that bears a striking resemblance to John Lovitz. He's a slimy businessman who lives and dies by the Latin phrase caveat emptor, so much so that he should probably tattoo it across his forehead. He sells junk to gullible kids without learning the item's intended use just to make a quick buck. Like a trio of magic tiny doors that are somehow linked together, or a pair of X-ray specs that can see into a parallel dimension where people in black morph suits have formed a pickup game of basketball. Sardo usually acts like an expert until the item's actual purpose is discovered and comes back to bite him on the ass. But what he really knows is fake vomit.
Have you seen our vomit? Have you seen our vomit? Have you seen our vomit?
Then there's Dr. Vink, who was exclusively in Frank's stories. And before you ask, no, he didn't play Hagrid in the Harry Potter movies. Unlike Sardo, who makes a comfortable living by peddling useless crap to clueless kids, Vink is a jack of all trades, spending most of his time as a master chef, a barber, and, as far as I know, the world's only collector of wild boar brains. He's also the retired filmmaker who created the silent horror classic Nosferatu. At least that's what he claims, although I'm thinking it's more like the whole Beowulf and Grendel situation, where he's taking credit for other people's work that's in the public domain. These two recurring characters actually appeared together in a two-part episode told jointly by Gary and Frank called The Tale of Cutter's Treasure. It's definitely one of the more ambitious episodes in the series in terms of production value and effects, even going so far as to get the respected stage and screen actor Charles S. Dutton. As I've said earlier, I've seen all of the first iteration and consider myself a big fan of the series. I'm sure that's blatantly obvious considering I dedicated 13 whole days to it. But when the main cast grew up and moved on, I really fell out of love with it. By then, Tucker had taken the reins as the post-pubescent leader of the Midnight Society. By this point, I liked Tucker more when he played a stoner in Half-Baked, or a horny teenager hitting on Lindsay Lohan in Mean Girls. I mean, I've never seen Mean Girls. What's Mean Girls? Plus, in the newer Are You Afraid of the Dark, he brought in his own set of friends who I didn't care for all that much.
Check out this, Eddie. Hello, Maggie, did you hear? They landed a man on the moon!
But there was one last hurrah for Gary when he reappeared for the three-part special titled The Tale of the Silver Sight. Episodes centered entirely around the death of Gary and Tucker's grandpa and his dying wish to reassemble a broken record and find the location of a charm called the Silver Sight. It's one that I didn't watch when it was new because I didn't care about the series anymore, but have watched it recently and think it holds up pretty well. It even has the show's co-creator DJ McHale returning as the writer. But overall, after 25 years, the series has legs and a real staying power. Despite the tacky 90s clothes and the goofy hair, Are You Afraid of the Dark has a timeless charm. There are way more people who look back fondly on this show than others of the time, such as Wienerville, Roundhouse, or even, dare I say, The Adventures of Pete and Pete. It even appeals to young newcomers to this day.
That's all, I'm gone.
That does it for this year, but who knows what'll happen next October. Maybe I'll cover more episodes, or maybe I'll move on to something else. Either way, let me leave you with the astute and enlightened words of Eric.
I got a cramp.
I declare this series of videos on Are You Afraid of the Dark closed.